Hey guys, this is Whitney, and welcome back to another episode of Spastic Chatter. If you are not familiar with Spastic Chatters, it is a platform made to feature those in the cerebral palsy community, and I get together weekly with individuals with CP, like myself, to have a kind of uncensored chat, if you will, about what it's like living with this type of disability. And for this week, I have Nicole, and I'm going to let her pronounce her last name so I don't butcher it. But she is a very strong disability advocate. She's done a lot for the cerebral palsy community, and we're going to talk about her advocacy work and her life in general, and what she has planned for the upcoming cerebral palsy conference, because she's the coordinator for it this year. So I'll let Nicole introduce herself, and then we'll get on to the conversation. So take it away, Nicole.
Hey, Whitney. It's so great to be with you today. My name is Nicole Luongo. I live in South Florida. I'm an adult approaching 50 years old living with cerebral palsy. I have been published in The Mighty, in Yahoo. I've written articles for HuffPost. I have a What CP Looks Like cerebral palsy page. And in 2019, I did a lot of advocacy work around getting buildings to light up to raise awareness for cerebral palsy. And this year, I hope to raise awareness in a bigger way and in a different way by helping out with the Cerebral Palsy Conference. And I'll be talking to you more about that later.
Awesome. So, I like to for my interviews, I like to kind of take it back to, like, because cerebral palsy is called it is termed a childhood disability, but what people don't realize is those children grow up to be adults. But anyways, how would you describe your childhood any different than per se than the normal childhood? Like, how was your childhood growing up with this disability?
Gee, that's a kind of a hard question to answer. I guess
No.
I didn't really know much about cerebral palsy. I just knew that I had it. So I went about the business of living my life the best way that I knew how.
Yeah.
And, I'm going to be 48 this year in June. And really, when I think back, I don't think I knew a single person with cerebral palsy until I got to college.
Really?
Yeah. So it was different. It was different.
So do you think your advocacy efforts started at a young age, since you were
No, I advocated for other things. I advocated for my mother. She had Alzheimer's, and I was one of her primary caregivers. And if there was a cause or something that I felt strongly about, maybe I would help out with it. But no, my advocacy work really started when I was an adult.
Really? So how did it begin?
It really began not even knowing that that's the path that I was going on. I was trying to get some help for my mother because we were having trouble trying to care for her at home. So I entered this contest that popped up on Facebook, and you have to write, you could do it yourself, or someone can nominate you to be in this caregiver contest. And so my brother nominated me, and within hours of what he wrote, I was in I don't know if I was in the top spot, or I was in the spot for a while because people all over, were voting for me. But somebody left a comment and said, "Oh, I was going to nominate my brother, but he saw your entry and he wants you to win." Turned out that person's brother was somebody who had selective dorsal rhizotomy surgery, and he went to the group on Facebook, Dr. Park's group, and told everybody about me and asked them to vote for me. And the doctor who that group was started by, Dr. Park, voted for me, and Dr. Park operated on me. It'll be 7 years in March that he operated. At that time, I didn't know him. I didn't know his group. I didn't know anything. No, I never heard of the surgery, nothing. So
that's cool. And I like how your advocacy at work started by like helping another person. It had nothing to do. It had really nothing to do with your own disability. It had to do with like a family member. So that's really cool. And
Thank you.
since you brought up the selective dorsal rhizotomy, you want to talk about your journey for that a little bit?
Sure. When I discovered that group, I went there to thank anybody who voted for me in this contest that I didn't win, by the way, but obviously we know now that wasn't the reason for me to even find out about that contest, because if I didn't enter that, I wouldn't be here talking to you today about a surgery that's changed my life. So while I was on the Facebook group that now has, I think, 13,000 members or whatever, it was big then, but it's even grown since then, I started reading all these posts from parents and showing the progress of their child after they had the surgery. And then I found adults on there, and I communicated with probably no less than 10 other adults who had the surgery and said, we'll answer any of your questions. Some of them messaged me and said, hey, I'm offering, I'll help you with anything or whatever. So that's what got started me on the road. And then I realized that so many people like me have never heard about it. I started hearing the same theme where people would say, whether they were parents or whether they were adults with CP, that they stumbled upon it just like I did. And I was like, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this picture, because this is a life-changing surgery, and parents and families and adults with CP, they have the right to know about it. Now, whether they want to have it or not, or whatever their opinion about it is or how they feel about it, doesn't matter. They just need to know that it's out there in case it is something that they want to look into. So that's when I decided that I wanted to write an article for HuffPost, because I couldn't think of a bigger platform to help me get the word out than them, and I couldn't figure out how to be published by them. So I went straight to the top. This is a true story. I messaged Ariana Huffington, who at the time, she started HuffPost. It originated with her. Now she's with Thrive. It's another platform. And I messaged her. I said, you know what? Why am I messing around here? I'm online trying to figure out how to send them pitches, and no one's answering me. I went right to her. She answered me. And when she answered me, I cried, because I was like, I can't believe. And she's like, yeah, we'd love to have you part of our platform. And that was it.
That's awesome. There's so much to talk about there, but I'm gonna finish with the selective dorsal rhizotomy and then go into it. But like you said, that like nobody really talks about that surgery. And from my experience, like when I looked at it in the past, and it's all geared towards children, and Dr. Park kind of I don't want to say pioneered it, but he's the one that kind of made it available to adults. Correct?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he perfected the technique that he uses. And because he has had such good results with his adult patients before me and after me, he increased the age for eligibility from 40. That was the age at the time that I had it, and I was 39. I was almost 40 years old when I had it. So at the time that I had it, the cutoff age was 40 years old. After I had it, he increased it to 50. So because he really is the only surgeon that I know of he's the best in the world, period. But nobody else wouldn't touch me.
Yeah.
They wouldn't.
When I first looked at it in college, like 10 or so years ago, like 15 years ago, it was only, they made it seem like it was only for children. And then like later on, like I found that adults were doing it. But it's a lengthy acceptance like period, right? You have to like, don't you have to do, you didn't have to like,
I mean, you have to send in information, and you send in, they have like a contact form or whatever, and then they'll let you know based on what you tell them if they need more, if you qualify to where they need to see x-rays and other things like that. And I believe now if you are over 40, then he will have to evaluate you in person. Whereas he didn't have to do that with me. He does see you the day before surgery, but if you're over 40, he wants to see you even before that to evaluate you in person.
That's awesome. So for somebody that doesn't know what we're talking about, do you want to give a quick overview of what the actual surgery is?
Sure. Sure. Selective dorsal rhizotomy, SDR surgery it's the only medical procedure that can reduce or eliminate spasticity that so many of us with cerebral palsy, especially if we have spastic diplegia, which is the type of cerebral palsy that I have, that's our nemesis. That's the problem. We have spasticity and it makes everyday tasks that much harder for us. And the surgery is a spinal surgery, and he goes in there and he basically gets rid of a certain percentage of the nerve roots that are causing the misfiring from the brain to the body. And that's probably the simplest way that I can explain, that kind of surgery, but that's what and because of Dr. Park's success rate and the fact that he's the best in the world, I no longer have any spasticity in my body. So
awesome. Yeah, I think you explained it perfectly to the extent that somebody can understand it. Yeah. And now I kind of want to, like you mentioned, you wrote the article for Huffington Post, and you went straight to the top of the person that created Huffington Post, and I love that because I always say that if you want, like, what's the worst that could happen? Like, you email her, she could not have responded, she could have said no, but you took that chance and you emailed her, and like you were able to be on Huffington Post. So you've done a lot of that. Just talking to you prior, you've took the initiative to just reach out to people about your advocacy work and other aspects. Do you want to talk about that, like the going
sure.
and all that? All the stuff you've been doing.
Oh, thank you. Well, I want to just piggyback on what you said. I am a firm believer in if you don't try, the answer will always be no. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's you want to write an article, you want somebody has a podcast like you do, and they want somebody to be on their podcast, and they might think, oh no, they're too big for me. They're not. No. Just ask, because you never know. So what I did was the Huffington Post article that just started going around the world, like literally, and then I would get messages from people, and I'm friends with some of them now, a lot of them, but some of them that are adults that have had the surgery because they found that article, and to me that's the reason why I did it. And since then, I wrote for The Mighty, and I write for my own. I have a website, a blog, and then I just started getting frustrated because I don't have a large audience on my blog, so it's not like a lot of people are reading what I write. And when I heard that there's 2 days in the year where cerebral palsy comes into play, National Cerebral Palsy Awareness Day on March 25th, World Cerebral Palsy Day on October 6th, again, I think both of those dates I found out about on Facebook, because I saw other advocates sharing this information, and I thought to myself, well, wait a second, how come I don't know about these dates?
Yeah.
We know about all these other dates, and some of them are stupid, quite frankly. Like, I love pizza, but there's a National Pizza Day, and you'll see everybody announcing it everywhere. And so back in 2000, on World Cerebral Palsy Day, October 6, 2018, I was successful in getting the Great Wheel in Seattle to light up in green. I had to get a sponsor for that one because they charge a small fee. So I found an organization locally in Seattle, and I asked them if they would sponsor it, and they did. So that was great. And then I thought to myself, well, wait a second, if I could get that one, and it was covered on television, by the way, too, which that was why I wanted that. I didn't know that was going to happen. That happened, like, if you watch football, like a Hail Mary pass, it happened at, like, somebody was able to help me, and I was like, oh, this is crazy, because I'm on the World Cerebral Palsy Day committee. They started a committee, gosh, maybe it's 5 years ago now, I'm on the inaugural committee. I still serve if they ever need me to help with anything. And one of the other members, he had a connection at a TV station. I didn't, so it kind of happened just by luck. And so after that, I said, you know what? Well, maybe I can just try to get more lightings just to try to raise awareness. And in 30 days, I had 30 lightings in 30 states. And when that happened, I said, wait a second here. The universe is conspiring with me. I'm getting some help here because that's unheard of. I wasn't expecting anything like that. I just wanted to try to raise awareness. And when it was all said and done, I had at least one lighting, landmark, bridge, a football stadium, you name it, in almost all 50 states. Lightings in 48 states, over 100 lightings, and I had lightings in 3 different countries for World Cerebral Palsy Day.
Yeah, that's very cool. And you mentioned, like before, when we spoke before, that it was just you. You were primarily the only one doing this. So like you didn't have like a strong team of support behind you. So it was just you reaching out to all these people, and like you mentioned before that like if they didn't email you or contact you back, you would still like you would follow up with them. And
it
takes a lot.
It was just me doing it. I didn't have a team. I mean, there are other advocates, and I give all of them credit that have had lightings in the past that will continue to light up buildings. But I have the distinct honor to say that I'm the first person ever to get at least one lighting in almost all 50 states. No other person has done it. No other nonprofit. No other organization. So yeah, I mean, I would listen. I can give you an example of the state of Hawaii, for example. There's only one place in Hawaii that I can find that lights up. It's called the Aloha Tower. It's beautiful. I cannot tell you how many emails that I had to send, and I had to call them because there was the only way to get in touch with anybody at the Department of, I forget what their department is called, whatever, because sometimes it's the Department of Transportation or it could be called another department. Different states run things, differently. But I had to call them. So I called, left a message, never heard back. Maybe it was a month later. The lady actually called me back, and I told her, like, you would have thought I won the lottery when she called me back. Because there wasn't anything else in Hawaii that I could have, anyone else I could have reached out to.
That's awesome. And, like, kudos to you for doing that, because it takes a lot of, perseverance.
That's my middle name.
Yeah, exactly. So do you kind of want to talk about your platform on Instagram? It's like what CP looks like.
Sure. Actually, that came about. I think trying to think of when I started that page. I was going to look to give you an exact date. I think it was 2013 because somebody I know in the CP community, his name is Trevor. He works out and he has cerebral palsy. And one day he did this video and he was doing planks. So as a just to support him and I'm like, well, I'm going to do a plank for you too, Trevor. And I did a plank and sent it to him. And while I was doing this, or right after, I came up with the idea that I want people to know what CP looks like because we're all not the same. And I feel many times we're lumped in the same category. We either all can't walk, we're all in wheelchairs. That's what I was finding in my advocacy work. Yep. So that's when I started the page, what CP looks like. And to my knowledge, I created that hashtag because nobody else had ever used it prior. So that's the hashtag I use with that. And, then the page I just started running with it. And I interviewed people in the past. I highlight articles in the news that feature people with cerebral palsy or, just talk about different things. And
that's awesome. That's kind of what you're talking. You said that cerebral palsy is so diverse. That's kind of one of my main points for Spastic Chatter is to show the diversity of the cerebral palsy community because we're so different. It's such a broad disability. One person could walk and have like you can barely tell they have cerebral palsy to like a person like me that's quadriplegic and uses the wheelchair, and like we have like it's so vast and so diverse. So one of your main advocacy efforts right now is you were just appointed, or I don't know the word for it, as the coordinator for the Cerebral Palsy conference. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes, I am so honored to be a part of the Cerebral Palsy conference, and that came about when last year they contacted me about being a speaker for their conference, and I was one of their speakers, and they had many speakers, and they also had Josh Blue and Maysoon Syed, excuse me. They were the two, like, featured speakers, and then they had a lot of other speakers like myself I talked about living a healthy lifestyle mentally and physically, and why cerebral palsy advocacy and representation matter. I gave 2 different presentations. And so then, they came to me and they said, you know what, we'd like to have you start a podcast. We want to feature people with cerebral palsy. We want to educate the audience about cerebral palsy. We want to make it fun. We want, people to come on and share information, maybe they have a business or a product or something that can help the community, whether the people, it's mainly, obviously geared, it's called Cerebral Palsy CP Conversations with Nicole Luongo. So obviously, we are targeting people with cerebral palsy, families who have a loved one with cerebral palsy, nonprofits who do any type of work that benefit anybody with a disability, but that would also include people with cerebral palsy.
That's very cool.
And they actually have a little book, because the people who put on the conference, it's Green Mountain Support Services, and they have been in the community for over 30 years, and they provide community-based support for individuals with disabilities living in northern Vermont. And what happened was, there's a gentleman named Jim Kavanaugh. He's an adult with CP. I think he might be in his 50s, maybe even older. At one point, he was looking for a conference. He has a caregiver, and he was like, hey, I'd really like to find a conference for just cerebral palsy, where you can meet people. And in his research, he only found, I think, like 2. There was one in, I think, London, and then somewhere, another country. And he was like, well, I can't travel, to go to these conferences. So because of him, there has been a cerebral palsy conference for the last 5 years. They do it every year in October, and this year is going to be the 6th one, and the dates are going to be October 1st and October 2nd.
And it's going to be virtual, right? Or is it going to be?
It's going to be virtual. That's just awesome. Like they did last year.
Yeah, so thanks to COVID, like everybody around the world can come.
Yeah, and if anybody's interested, they can buy this book to support them. And just go to cerebralpalsyconference.org, and you can support them, and all the proceeds go to the conference, because they don't get any grant money or anything to put this conference on, and it's because of all the hard work that they do. That, to my knowledge, I don't know about you, but I've never heard of a conference just for cerebral palsy.
No, it's one of a kind, and it's something that's much needed. In my opinion, because it just gives a sense. Like when it's like a niche, or like when it's just cerebral palsy, there's more of a kinship there, I guess you could call it. Like, yeah. So where can people follow you on social media, Nicole?
I have a website. They can go there, NicoleLuongo.com. They can see my writings, where I've been published, all that kind of thing, all those kinds of things. And they can also see my social media which on Facebook, I have, like I said, a What Cerebral Palsy Looks Like Facebook page. I also have a verified Facebook page, the one with the blue check mark, which is my name. And then on Instagram, I'm at What CP Looks Like. And on Twitter, I changed it slightly because when I was doing the lightings, so it's at green, the number 4, CP. And if anyone's interested in the list of the lightings that when I did that in 2019, there's a Go Green for CP tab on my website and lists all the lightings. Maybe they'll find one in their city or town. And if it's something they want to continue, they can do that. In fact, a friend of mine, she's doing the same thing. She emailed the Mid-Hudson Bridge in New York, and they're lighting up on March 25th. And also, I do have a Go Green for CP Facebook page as well. I don't really do much on that page anymore because I'm not actively pursuing lightings, but sometimes I'll pop in there, like, let people know, hey, I'm doing a podcast now. I'm going to be part of the CP conference, because there are people who might be interested in that.
That's awesome. I'm going to leave all that in the description below so that people can follow you and everything. So, one of the last questions I like to ask my guests is if they have any advice for people that are in similar situations, or like want to get involved in advocacy and don't know where to start, or any advice in general. So what would you say to people, Nicole?
The advice that I have for people is very simple. I want them to remember that there is no cookie cutter formula to being an advocate. You can really do whatever you want. What I like to tell people is, if you're seeing Whitney and you say, well, I want to do what she's doing, she has a podcast, you can do that. If you want to have a website, or you want to have a blog and you want to write about some aspect of CP or share something, you can do that. If you want to make videos, you can do whatever you want. Don't think that just because somebody else is doing it, well, no, that's her area, that's her thing. No, there's room for everybody. And nowadays, everybody, look, we're all on these things all day long. And you can't tell me that you can't pick up your phone and make a quick video. Or if you're shy and you don't want to be on video or on camera or whatever, maybe Whitney, she puts out a tweet or a post, and she says, hey, I interviewed this person, here's the link. Why don't you share that? If you like the episode, share it. That's advocacy too, supporting other advocates who are raising awareness for cerebral palsy or any other disability or whatever area that interests you. But I just say, you have to just start. Don't compare yourself to anybody, and don't think that you can't do it, because there's really nothing you can't do.
Yeah, that's very good advice, and that's very awesome advice, and I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you, Nicole, for being on Spastic Chatter and sharing your story and everything you have going on. And I look forward to listening and watching cerebral palsy conversations. And I will leave all the links in the description, like I said. And again, thank you. And for those of you watching and want to be on an episode of Spastic Chatter, like Nicole said, just take that risk, and there's always a link in the description, or you can comment wherever you see this video. And check back next week for another episode of Spastic Chatter.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Bye.